Okay, we should be recording now.
Awesome, thank you. Well, welcome everybody to our third live recorded event for Seek Peace. Thank you to everyone who's joined us live, and to those who are listening in later. We will be running for about an hour, followed by a time for questions. I might just ask John to get our presentation up on the screen for everybody, and then we'll make a start on a quick blurb at the front end about who we are, if you haven't tuned into anything in the past that we have done. So I'm Kay. I'm married to John. The picture on the screen also has our two children, Abraham and Eleanor. Our background, if we haven't met before, is we started working years ago, working in Christian ministries. We've worked in local churches. We have worked for local, for Christian non-profits and international Christian faith-based organizations. About 4 or 5 years ago now, we returned from being sponsored missionaries and Christian vocational workers based in Nigeria, where we lived for around 5 years. Our children joined us and were born during those years, and we worked for a Bible college, and we worked during a period of Nigeria's history where it was really wrestling with a lot of post-conflict processes. And so a lot of the missional work that we did and that we were drawn to was peace building. And it was in these years that God really laid on our heart personally a real love and sense of conviction and calling into the work of Christian peace building. So we straddle a number of different worlds. We happen to work now as associate pastors in our local church. We also work and have co-founded Seek Peace, which we will talk more about in a second. And I also work in research. So I work for King's College London on a multi-year long research project investigating the role of religion and religious faith and its social consequences for peace and for peace building. And from later this year, I am starting a UK government awarded PhD grant to investigate alongside some of our partners the role of faith and religious faith in unlikely transgressive friendships in regions of conflict and regions where a religious identity is one of the salient identity markers in those regions, and potentially one of the dimensions of the conflict profile. So I might just ask John to flip to the next slide. We started Seek Peace in 2021, and our vision as a small non-profit based in the UK with a number of church and individual partners around the world who support our work from both Australia, parts of Europe and the UK, and supporting a number of missional partners in different parts of the world that we'll discuss. Our vision is to equip the church and communities of faith to be a voice for peace in every community, so that when people think about the local church, they envision a community of people committed to justice, committed to truth-telling, committed to forgiveness, and committed to reconciliation. And how do we do that? Well, our model is to partner with local churches and faith communities to plan, learn, adapt, and fund faith-inspired, evidence-led everyday peace building. Can we jump to the next slide, please? So who do we work with? Oh, we have 5 partners around the world, and we support 6 projects with those partners. Our first is Crudan, who we began partnering with in 2023. Our first 2 were the Kent's Computer Centres in Nigeria, Middle Belt, Nigeria. That's the third, like on the right. If you're looking at the slides or this video back later, we started working with them back in 2020 or 2021, and we've had a long connection with them for many years prior. Our second partner that we began working with is CHIPS. And they have projects in Nakwaili, Ghana, and they also have projects in parts of southeast London, in Brixton, where they're tackling a number of different social challenges and social areas of division and exclusion, particularly amongst youth. In Nakwaili, Ghana, they have a number of different projects that are trying to tackle economic poverty and trying to bring different sides of a historic enemy group together to try and build a sustainable economic system in harmony alongside each other. Crudan, we support one of their projects, the Church Transformation Project, and what they do is they're working with a number of churches to try and encourage and catalyze local churches in different regions of Nigeria to work out what are the local issues faced by their specific communities. What are they like? Where are they well planted to try and tackle community challenges and to respond out of Christian love, and then to try and through that motivate people into peace building and into community missions. So that's a really exciting project that works with 11 different local churches at the moment. And a lot of the things that have come out of this partnership with Crudan are also being scaled out to their network of over 200 churches and theological institutions across Nigeria. And we've had the joy of working with their team over the last couple of years on that project. Our newest partners are Al Shabib Risala in Lebanon. Many of you will be quite familiar with them. We began a partnership before some of the political crises that occurred late last year, and then we pivoted with them to respond to the rising political tensions that were faced at the end of late last year. And thank you to our supporter base, we were able to raise quite a lot of support to give them extra emergency support in that time of uncertainty. And now we've just started a really exciting piece of work with them to try and look at all of the projects that they're doing in their peace center based in the Borj Hamoud community of Beirut, and trying to work out, okay, how is peace and peace outcomes alongside the Christian witness that they are called into, how do those things sit together, and how do they build that into their practice so that they are achieving cohesion and they're achieving peace in and through their service of their community and the sharing of the gospel. And our newest of all partners and our special guest today as well is Reimagining New Communities based in Kenya. These guys are fantastic. I am not going to do too much to introduce them now because we're going to have a lot of time for them to introduce themselves later. But we have Salim on the call. Salim, would you like to give us a wave if you're there? And we have Grace as well. And Salim was the founded Reimagining New Communities, and Grace is his amazing 2IC. They together are a great partnership, doing some phenomenal work, especially in areas of faith for peace, which is the topic we will be talking about today. But we'll come to you guys soon. I'm just going to keep moving forward a little bit to the next slide, please. Okay, before I get to this slide, I'd also like to introduce Marika today. Marika, if you're there, could you give us a wave?
Can you see me?
Yes, I can see you. Hi, Marika. Everyone, I'd like to introduce Marika. Marika is our newest trustee for Seek Peace. She joined us a few months ago. Marika we're really excited to have her join us on our trustee team. She's alongside Paul Clark and Alistair Sim and Nigel Thomas. And Marika's background is working with another Christian charity working in peace building in Christian peace building, and she knows John through study. Is that right? You guys moved together.
Yeah, we did the masters together.
We did the masters together at Winchester, studying peace building and reconciliation, and she's also a specialist in monitoring, evaluation, and learning. So, Marika, I might just hand over to you quickly to introduce yourself, then.
I wonder what's left to say. Thank you for that kind introduction, Kay. Yes, so my name is Marika Peach. I'm originally from Germany. I live in the UK, so I moved across about 11 years. And I actually came into this sector through Holocaust education, so through the own violent past of the country I was born in and grappling with my grandfather's did in the war as a young teenager and kind of coming into that. And also just growing up in church and trying to reconcile that. So yes, as Kay said, I've kind of came into it through ministry work as well here in the UK, and then ended up working for Tearfund in the UK and was actually posted in the Middle East for a number of years. So I was in Mosul in Iraq for 2 years, after it was liberated from ISIS, and kind of saw the humanitarian work and kind of how do we respond to need. And I think there was a growing question for me, can we do something before? And also, what are we doing as Christians? What are we doing as the church in those moments? And kind of seeing it and being ingrained in that mishmash of humanitarian and also missionary community over there. So it was quite a steep learning and a lot of heartbreak in that as well. So I ended up studying alongside John peace building and reconciliation, because I think there's something unique in going in, and that I think our faith lens really brings to long-standing conflict communities, and to kind of really come into those spaces and equip. And I think there's something unique that the church brings and that our faith brings, but also where the humanitarian sector, the development sector, like the research bit, there's something there as well. And bringing that together, I think, is such a unique thing that Seek Peace really brings, because I'm seeing the need everywhere I look. And as Kay said, I'm now working for a small peace building organization here in the UK. It's called Court Global. And we're working more on the rights-based approach. So we're really looking at the power dynamics between those who kind of have the rights to claim them, to really look out for the peace in their communities, and those people who are in power and who might not even be aware that there's something there. So we're very much working on that relationship piece. So it's a slightly different angle to the same issue we're seeing. But I'm very, very grateful to kind of come on board with Seek Peace to kind of see more of that. And as Kay said, I'm focusing on monitoring and evaluation in that lens as well. So I'm seeing a lot of kind of the best practices of what is going on in Seek Peace as well. And it's really exciting to kind of see this in the partners, in the practices that are implemented here. And I think I'll leave it at that, but thank you so much for having me.
Oh, thank you, Marika. We are so excited to have you on board. We think, as a learning-orientated organization ourselves, we just see such a value in coming shoulder to shoulder around different approaches to trying to to take the attributes of our faith, the history of our faith, and to combine that with a lot of what we're learning in the space through method and through research, and try and marry those together and all be on this journey, trying to work out in different contexts, what does that mean as we bear witness to Christ and to the history of our faith, and also advance peace across the world and be a part of that story. And so, Marika, we are so excited to have you on board. And Marika has already been a huge asset to the first trustees meeting that she was a part of in the last month, asking phenomenally great questions that help us to just go further in our thinking about where things are emerging. So thank you, Marika. It's so great to have you with us. Okay, so as you can see, guys, for many of you who have supported us from different times, we occupy and straddle a number of different worlds. So we have a leg firmly rooted in our Christian, our area, our group, what we've emerged from, our faith tradition, our core sense of belief and purpose, and where we've found God's calling upon our own life. We also have our feet firmly alongside trying to be in connection and network with phenomenal ministries working around the world who are trying to pioneer new approaches to building peace and doing that as a witness to the Christian faith and to our faith in really difficult regions. And we have our 1 foot firmly rooted in best practice, and where the field at large is at in terms of research. And so we try to occupy these and live in those tension points, and at the heart of what we do, we try to be committed to being a learning orientated organization and ministry. So that's pretty much all I'd like to say. I'd now just quickly like to draw our attention to this slide that John has put up for us. For those of you who might be tuning in for the first time, we are a charity. We're able to do what we do through the generosity of supporters in many parts of the world. And thank you to so many people who have stood with us over the years and have brought Seek Peace in many parts where it is today. We currently, for those of you who might be new and working out ways you might like to be able to support or get involved, we have an end of financial year appeal. In this appeal, we're prioritizing supporting our Nigerian partners with capacity funding. Just to put that into perspective for you, Nigeria as a nation at the moment is battling with 23% inflation rate. So I know that the UK and maybe other parts of the world as well have been having high inflation rate in the last number of years, and that has come at a real burden and cost to people. But at Nigeria, I mean, we're thanking God this is down from a 34% inflation rate last year, and it's going in the right trajectory. But it just means that every single expense, every single part of putting together a peace project and making it successful is just so costly. To give you some idea of some of those costs, the computer centers run on fueled generators. So for example, to power all of those computers and bring all those young people through, they are powered for the majority of the time, not by grid power, but by petrol generators. And also there's costs associated, for example, with like bringing internet. And these are just some small but really significant things that we really feel strongly to partner with our Nigeria-based partners with this year and try and release more funding into some of their core needs at the moment. So if you feel strongly to respond, that's one way that you can. Please either take a screenshot of this slide or head over using the QR code to the ways that you can give. We also have banking details on our website. But that's all from me. Thank you everybody for being here. I'm going to pass over to John.
All right. Can people see and hear me? Yeah, great. Awesome. All right. So what I'll be introducing us to, and this will lead into the conversation with Salim and Grace, is thinking about this area that we're focused on at the moment with Seek Peace. And our slogan, you can see it down at the bottom, our vision includes equipping the church and communities of faith to be a voice for peace. And this is what a lot of our work of recent has focused on. Particularly, we talked about Crudan earlier, trying to help be part of equipping these churches across Nigeria. And this is an area of learning that started to emerge in that we're passionate and we want to be able to equip these churches to be a voice for peace in their communities. And sometimes we're asked, well, what exactly do we mean by that? And so I've got a few examples here. You can see them down the bottom. And we've got the image here is trying to show that the heart of what the church is, reconciliation at the heart, trying to be a voice for those values in the community. And some of the ways that can happen is by being committed to dialogue in our communities, listening and understanding people coming from different perspectives, creating space for healing. And this can be particularly important in conflict, post-conflict communities. It's difficult to move on from conflict. It's difficult to step out of conflict cycles when there's trauma. So this is creating space for people to remember well, to have their truth about what happened to them be heard, and creating spaces for healing in that. And I think our faith often speaks powerfully to those principles. Another one is addressing sectarianism and building relationships across the divide. So the church having a unique voice in how it engages with other faiths and people that have differences to us. Another one is addressing and removing barriers to integration. And we're seeing, as Kay mentioned, we're also pastors here in the UK, and we're seeing a lot of barriers to integration, whether that's racial, cultural, generational. And the more people separate themselves from one another, the less integration there is. I think the deeper divides form in some of these areas. So local churches having a voice for that. I've also got a few examples of other organizations doing this. So Corrymeela is a very famous organization in the UK, probably one of the first organizations in the UK, Christian organizations committed to these peace building and reconciliation efforts. In Northern Ireland, they've got a long history of bringing different sides of the conflict together to create these shared spaces to tell stories and listen. We talked about Crudan a little bit earlier, an organization we have partnered with in Nigeria for a while, and their focus is creating these projects, bringing together different aspects of the community, different groups in the community, different associations to work together to address shared needs. And then this one, if you're based in the minority world in the global north, I'd encourage you to look up these guys, the Parish Collective. I think they're an American-based organization, and they're trying to add new life to this idea of parish, right? Where it used to be a lot more common, but now we're talking less about parish, and their passion is to, you can see it here, church plus neighborhood equals parish. So how is the church having its feet rooted in the community to be present and to recognize issues that are causing division and to create shared spaces to encourage integration and discussing shared issues in the community. And as we've been working in this space, and this is, when we're talking about Seek Peace, this is where we have more experience, even before starting Seek Peace, working in communities or community projects, of seeing how these values that are core to our faith play out in communities and how the church can be a voice for that. Very core to a lot of what we've done and the experience that we have in this space. But one thing, particularly in working with Crudan, one learning that we've really, well, I say we've had this learning, we've been told this many times in our work by churches, by pastors, by staff at Crudan, our partners, saying some of the tension that this is creating and encouraging the churches to create this space is that churches can sometimes, and pastors and congregants can sometimes feel like, how experienced are they to do this, especially when there are issues in the church that are quite visible to people outside the church, that they can see division happening in local churches. And then people can feel, how genuine is this voice we're having for reconciliation communities when we're not feeling that in our lives and we're not feeling that in our church communities. And so that's led us to think, okay, well, there's this gap. If the church is going to be a reconciling church in their communities, how do they address this gap that they're experiencing maybe in their own lives, but also definitely in their church communities? And that's having a reconciled church. And what do we mean by that? Well, we mean having a theological lens for understanding conflict and reconciliation. Okay, so sometimes some churches will tackle this topic often. Other churches, you might not see this tackled as often. But what theological lens do we have for understanding conflict and reconciliation? And the Bible is full of many stories that touch on this, and many teachings in the New Testament, and then many stories in the Old Testament that can confuse this lens and perspective. So how are we as churches developing this theological lens for understanding conflict and reconciliation? And then another one building on that is, what skills are we developing in our churches as individuals, but also as pastors? What skills do we have in the areas of conflict transformation, so that when we go out into communities, we go out in an experienced way, not people that feel like phonies engaging in matters of reconciliation and peace building. And then finally, something we'll touch on with Salim and Grace as well, is internal structures and processes that facilitate reconciliation, right? And this is really getting into the nitty-gritty of what can be issues in churches that are barriers to reconciliation or barriers to unity, and what can be done to introduce processes that help that along. And again, this is, as I said earlier, our experience with Seek Peace is really on the previous slide in that area of community engagement. And we're starting to learn more and more from our partners and from, as we're talking to other organizations in this space as well. Well, what does it mean for churches to engage in some of these concepts for themselves? And we're doing that in a way that is engaging with other organizations and helping them to guide this process as well. And in those conversations with other organizations, we've come across lots of organizations that work at points of crisis in communities, right? Or church communities where there's an issue that has boiled over and has escalated, and it's causing significant division. You might call it crisis. Lots of organizations trained to come in at those points and do lots of mediation work and help the church move beyond that point of crisis into the future. What we're talking about here is before those points of crisis, thinking about, well, no, before the storm hits, how do we build our foundations on the rock, right? Jesus's famous parable of the foolish man who builds his house on the sand and the wise man who builds his house on the rock, right? The time to build that house is not when the storm hits. It's a long time before then, to start putting in foundations and to start working towards unity before the crisis hits. Or as JFK said it in another way, a more catchy way, the best time to repair your roof is when the sun is shining. So are we doing that in our churches, right? Do we have a focus to build these skills and to build these theological lenses for conflict so that when the storm hits, the roof is repaired and people are equipped to be more resilient to conflict when it appears.
And one of the really exciting aspects of our most recent partnership with Reimagining New Communities is the bi-directional value that I think we're both starting to have from each other. Reimagining New Communities in some sort of limited and small way are able to be supported by the technical monitoring, evaluation, and learning processes and ways that Seek Peace can come alongside them in their work. But we in this space are really following their lead, and we're able to learn from programs that they have been running for a long time, for many years, in their own context, focused at church leaders in faith for peace and overcoming and trying to overcome many of these barriers. And we're positioned differently. You know, John and I, Seek Peace, we have a different network of influence, but we really have to credit Salim and Grace and their wider team at Reimagining New Communities with really encouraging us and challenging us and taking the lead on how we could step into doing more of this and being skilled in skilling others in our wider networks more in these ways. So we're now going to hand over to a time of interview. I think John is going to ask Salim and Grace a number of questions about their work and specifically their Faith for Peace project.
Great. All right. It's good to see you, Salim and Grace. Great to have you here with us. The first question I have here is, Salim, what is the Faith for Peace program that we've mentioned? What does it involve?
Greetings from Nairobi. It's 1 p.m. Nairobi time. Like John mentioned, my name is Salim Charles. I currently serve as the founder and executive director of Reimagining New Communities, which is a peace-building organization that works with churches and schools in Kenya. And we have been in existence for since 2021, June 2021. And just go straight to John's question. The Faith for Peace program, it's a peace-building program that supports churches and particularly pastors, especially those in the grassroots who might not have enough exposure. And so this program supports these churches and pastors to develop skills and behaviors in areas of conflict transformation, mediation, reconciliation, and inclusive leadership. And just in terms of creating healthy internal structures and procedures. And in this program, we believe that when we build the capacity of the pastors in these areas, and especially now the churches, they'll be able to sustain these changes internally and therefore be able to influence their community in terms of building trust and bridging divisions. And that includes religious division. We have had a lot of political intolerance in Kenya and all those kind of things, but ultimately contributing to community development and ensuring that there is just, equitable, and peaceful society in Kenya. And especially grassroots. And so this Faith for Peace program, it extends in terms of fostering reconciliation practices among the congregation members. It's not just about building the capacity of pastors and church leaders, but also having that reconciliation practices among congregation members, enabling them to embrace that peaceful behavior and interaction, but also shifting a culture, shifting to a culture of promoting understanding and resilience within the church communities. And so, yes, John, overall, the program, seeks to resolve existing conflict while also instilling sustainable practices of reflective leadership, within the pastors and the church leaders, and accountability, like whatever they do, the decision they make, they're accountable, but also at the center of it, them having the skills to transform conflict that, it has a greater ripple effect in the broader communities where the churches are planted. Yeah, thank you.
Great. Thank you so much, Celine. Next question is for Grace. Sorry, Grace, I've noticed you've had some connection difficulty. Are you here with us?
Yes, I am, John.
Excellent. All right. Well, Grace, do you want to introduce yourself first? And then the question for you is around churches. But yeah, introduce yourself first, please.
Hi, everybody. My name is Grace Wendell. I am the Programs and Administration Lead at Imagining Communities. Thank you for having us.
Great. Thanks, Grace. Okay, the question for you, Grace, is you guys tackle, and Grace, very aware of this, you work a lot with different schools and a lot with children programs, but you run these different programs. Do you want to briefly describe what these different programs are, and then describe why did you decide to work with churches as a key element of building peace in communities as well?
Sure. So we have an education program that works with schools, teachers, and learners in building their peace building and conflict resolution skills. And this is us trying to ensure that children have a voice in change, and they also have their voices out there in terms of conflict resolution and the systems that we put up as a society. And now we had an assumption that if a child goes to school, they're affiliated to a religious space, and this is either a church or a mosque, and that makes up 85% of the Kenyan community, Muslims and Christians. So these institutions, as you can see with the data, they're trusted institutions. However, faith leaders, they lack the tools to engage constructively in issues of trauma, intercommunal conflict, and social healing. Our area of comfort is the church, and therefore in churches, a lot of sermons avoid controversial subjects like land disputes, ethnic tensions, or youth marginalization. And sometimes when gender-based violence happens, especially between children and women, they are spiritualized and not addressed through support or seeking justice for the victims. In women, there are women and youth ministries in churches, and a lot of the times there isn't any strategic integration of conflict resolution efforts in them. So our priority to support churches in Kenya stems from the idea that these institutions have immense influence within the communities, and therefore they need to be equipped with the right skills and knowledge that is beyond biblical inspiration, and this gives them the ability to contribute to issues of conflict transformation, human rights, and community cohesion. Thank you.
Great, thanks, Grace. Okay, so how many churches are you working with in this program, and why is it you made a decision to focus on these particular churches?
So we piloted the Faith for Peace program in 2023, and we supported 30 churches across 6 different counties in Kenya. However, through our engagement with Seek Peace, we were able to have a better strategy to ensure that we support a certain number of churches that for a particular period of time, so that we're able to measure the reflective practices and tools into their leadership styles, and how this has increased participatory decision making into their churches. So with the help of Seek Peace, we developed a 3-year engagement strategy through which we will be supporting 15 churches. We chose 15 because it's a manageable number and it offers a deeper engagement with them. So this was towards the end of the year, and we came up with a call for applications, and a lot of churches applied. However, we prioritized the 15 churches, and we based this off selection criteria, which involved the size of the church. So it was from small to medium churches, that's about 50 to 300 members, because we believe that this kind of church, this size of a church, has the potential for growth and offers deeper community impact. We chose from different locations. We work in 6 counties, so from all the 6 counties, that's where we chose. And this includes both rural and urban churches to ensure that there's diversity and there's also contextual learning. We also selected evangelical churches because they have strong community outreach and structures that they have put in place, and they have also the potential to mobilize peace narratives. Indigenous denominations, that was also another category. This was to elevate expressions of faith and the different theological contexts that are there in peace building. And then also, because we want to do this the right way, we ensured that all these churches are formally registered so that there's also accountability and there's sustainability of this engagement. And lastly, it's a church that is structurally flexible. This means that it's easy for them to integrate new ideas and are adaptable to change.
Great, thanks so much, Grace. Next question for you, Salim. So we've touched on these a little bit already, but could you explain what are some of the barriers to these to reconciliation in these churches that you work with, and how does your program aim to address these?
Thank you, John. Yeah, like you mentioned, and we have had this discussion with you throughout our engagement. There are numerous barriers and challenges that the church face. However, focusing on what directly connects with our work at Reimagine New Communities, we see a number of barriers, and that starts with lack of knowledge in terms of peace building and reconciliation. And that's why our program exists, to provide contextual training on conflict transformation and reconciliation. We also see a lot of churches, in terms of being very rigid when it comes to doctrinal issues, that this is what they believe in and this is what they'll be able. And I'll give you a very good example is when you're engaging with very indigenous religious groups in Kenya, there are those who don't believe that children have to go to the hospital, that you can pray and we have had children dying because they were not taken to the hospital. And so what we are also doing with this, our program, is to ensure that there is inclusive theological reflection that embrace peace and diversity, that people understand, that kind of a diversity in terms of how do you interpret even the word of God and how do you, live it in your day-to-day life. And like Grace mentioned, there is also limited youth and women engagement, especially on leadership processes. And we see that across all the churches that we work with, and also the ones that we have interacted with. And in our new strategy that Seek Peace has helped us to develop, we are designing sessions that are intentionally going to involve youth and women in dialogue and leadership and mediation. And also just putting what is the space of pastors, spouses, and especially wives when it comes to mediation processes in churches. So we want to be able to elevate women's engagement in church leadership and all that. And fourth, it's and which is a very major barrier that we have witnessed within the churches, is the fear of addressing conflict directly. Most religious leaders and pastors, they fear even addressing issues affecting their churches and affecting even members, because maybe this member is the one who gives a lot of money in church and has been beating his wife, has been neglecting his family. And so addressing this kind of issues, the pastors feel like they will lose this member. And so you find that there is a lot of, a lot of issues happening within the congregation, but the pastor is, he has been fearing to confront these kind of things. And so what we are doing in terms of supporting our pastors is, how do you create a safe and trust-based spaces for honest conversation with the congregation, regardless of the position of these members in the church. The other thing, and lastly, that we have witnessed and we are working on is inadequate structure for child safety. We took a deliberate role as the leadership of the Emerging New Community to enroll to more training to understand how do we enhance child protection and safeguarding in faith communities. We see this as a very big barrier in terms of churches promoting this, and as an organization where children are at the center of the work that we are doing, we are supporting churches with within our programs to develop church-based framework for child protection and participation, just having child protection policies and safeguarding mechanism within these churches. So I'll say those are, there are other, many other barriers, but within the work that we are doing, these are the barriers that we have been able to, see and work towards, in terms of resolving that. Yeah.
Great. Thanks, Salim. Okay, so similar to what I was describing on the previous slides we had about the change starting within the church and then expanding out to the community through work that the church does. Grace, as you mentioned, Grace, it's a 3-year program taking the churches on this journey. Salim, what do you expect towards the end of this 3-year program when churches start to engage with their communities? What do you imagine that engagement looks like?
Thank you, John, for that question. And I cannot answer that question without saying that this 3-year strategic plan could not be, we could not even realize it if we did not meet Seek Peace. Because when we started this work and piloted the program in 2020, in 2022, as Grace mentioned, 2023, we were not clear of what really we wanted to do. So we'll do small trainings here and there, engage here and there, and we are all over in terms of our engagement with the churches. But what Seek Peace and help us towards the end of last year is to bring clarity in our thoughts and in our structure on how we need to engage the church and we need to engage in our work. Yes, we are experts in peace building, but sometimes just having a clear theory of change, a clear framework might be a problem. And we are a growing organization and we need, we are always kind of trying different methods. But now with the help of the Seek Peace, we have a 3-year plan. And what we hope to achieve is within the 3 year is that the churches will have matured in their internal capacity and theological grounding to become active. Remember, I talked about their need for peace building, need for theological awareness. And so our goal, our hope is that within 3 years that these churches will have matured in their internal capacity and theological grounding to become active, trusted agents of reconciliation. Reconciliation subject is needed, or reconciliation issues are needed in Kenya. It's very important at this juncture of our country. Also, engagement model will have, is developed to intentionally and deeply rooted in church-centered framework. And so as it progresses, as we progress and work with these churches, starting with personal, how we have designed it is start with personal transformation. So in terms of self-awareness in the lives of the pastors and all that, and then moving to institutional strengthening. So strengthening the church's systems for them to be able to start getting and streamline, mainstream these changes within their system. And then what this program in 3 years, it is culminating into community-based reconciliation efforts, where pastors and church leaders are the ones leading these efforts, as trusted, as Grace said, as trusted members of the community. And so by the 3rd year, we anticipate that these churches will be able to engage in a number of things. One, is community dialogue to bridge ethnic and political and religious division. Kenya is very divided country. We have more than 45 tribes, and most of the time we are divided along political affiliation and ethnic division, but also quiet religious division and intolerance. Also, we hope that these churches will be able to engage in mediation to mediate local conflicts, using faith-based and nonviolent approaches. And that's what we have been, we are training them on. Then lead trauma healing and reconciliation circles within the congregation. There is a lot of, healing that is needed, not just within the church community, but across the communities. And so we hope that these pastors and these churches will be able to engage in this after 3 years. And also just in terms of partnering with local institutions for civic education and peace initiatives, because most of the time churches refrain from this kind of subjects. And so through these processes, we anticipate a number of things like, greater social cohesion in the communities where the churches are planted. And now the church becomes a voice of reason when it comes to, community development. We also anticipate the church will be trusted as peace agents beyond their congregation. And that is a very important aspect in terms of, the gospel of our Lord Jesus Christ. And then that on local ownership of reconciliation and conflict resolution, we need, we anticipate that there will be that ownership, that the church will see that, this is our process, which we need to be able to lead. But also more importantly is, we anticipate safer and more inclusive communities where everyone feels valued. That is a very core aspect in terms of our work, that everyone and people like, groups like children, they are valued, and we value their wisdom. We value their learning, because that's what the Bible also calls us to do, and all those kind of people. So we see people from the lens of our salvation and not of who they are as just individuals.
Yeah. Thanks a lot, Salim. I find it fascinating. A few years ago, we were working with different partners to start engaging with churches and go, well, why aren't churches having more of a voice in this, and almost sort of prodding them to go, come on, have more of a voice in these community areas. It's been fascinating when we met you guys and we started partnering with you guys. The challenge that you guys provided to us was, what do you mean they're not getting engaged in these things? They're struggling with them so much internally as well. And perhaps that's where the journey starts. And it's taken us on a massive engagement. And we've really, really been thrilled to work with you guys. It's been such a pleasure. It's been such a natural thing over the course of the last, 9 months to log on to calls with you guys and talk through the program that you're doing, and for us to give our nerdy technical advice and our research advice, and you guys to be able to ground that as well in things that you're doing and things that you're learning. And we're loving that engagement, and also what it speaks to with different partners as well. You guys being able to encourage those learnings in us, and also interact with our other partners as well to encourage them with the skills that you guys have as expert facilitators in the church space, to be able to inform other areas of other Christian organizations wanting to get involved in this as well. Kay, I can see you put up your hand.
I always throw curveball questions that John isn't expecting. So sorry, John, again. We were speaking the other day, Salim, and I was really moved by what you shared, and I could really relate to it. It was about our Christian identity and the role of our faith in the kind of work that you guys are engaged in and that we're engaged in. And it felt like we were sharing a conversation that was like, it felt like for a long time we had to like really footnote the fact that we did this as people of faith and people who were working with religious institutions. We worked with, this group of people and this group of people and this group of people, and then you'd kind of in small print put like the church. And so I'm keen to hear more from you about the changes that you've seen in the sector. You guys have a lot of knowledge in both Christian ministry, but also working with a lot of different non-profit and aid organizations. What changes are you seeing towards embracing our faith identity? And how significant is that for you both in the work that you are doing in Kenya?
Thank you, Kay. That's a very amazing question, and I've been, like you said, I've been reflecting about it so much, and I think, you know, where the world is today, where we need to be able, where everybody is coming out to identify themselves, you know, and say, this is who I am, this is who I am. It cannot be like, you know, when we are born again Christians, you know, we are called by the name of our Lord Jesus Christ, that we put that as an option in terms of our introduction, you know. And I see that as a very important aspect, because when we get into a room and we are able to identify, because other people, other religions, other groupings will never be afraid to introduce themselves or to introduce their identity. And so I find it, even just someone saying I'm born again, becoming a problem. And so what we are, you know, hoping and we are doing in terms of all this kind of engagement, and it's a learning process, you know, reading more books, interacting with more people, and all those kind of things. And what we have been able to experience, and through your support and John's support, is to be confident to say this, to be confident to say, you know, we don't just work with the religious, because initially we used to say, you know, we work with the religious leaders. No, we work with pastors and church leaders, because that being particular is very key. Because sometimes someone will ask you, okay, so what kind of religious leaders do you work with? So now that's when you're starting to saying, oh, we work with church leaders. So no, we work with churches and church leaders, pastors and church leaders. And so what we have learned through this period that we have, you know, interacted with you, is not being afraid to, you know, to confirm our faith and say that this is the kind of work that we are doing, because it's only until then that this work will have impact. Because when we confirm our faith and we say that these are the people that we work with, because it's the spirit, there is a saying that says that, you know, you cannot give what you don't have, you know. And so if you don't believe in the people that you work with and support, then it becomes quite a problem to be able to get that kind of impact that you want to have. And so that's what I'll say in terms of that. It's very important to, you know, even that kind of affirmation that we are believers and this is the kind of work that we do. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you. That's fantastic. I really appreciate that answer. And it is encouraging to hear that it does feel at the moment like there is more and more confidence that we have to be able to say, this is what inspires me. You know, this is why I do this work. It's so deeply embedded within me. It's not like a footnote. This is part of my identity. This is part of my identity and my new identity that I have chosen to put on when I put on Jesus, you know. And I think that I think it's exciting when we see ministries like yours who are doing this, and it's a real witness to some really fundamental and core beliefs that are often overlooked about being a Christian. So thank you, guys.
All right, thanks so much. We're going to open it up to others for questions soon. We'll do similar to what we did previously in previous sessions, that we'll end at the hour and then we'll open it up for questions for people who want to stay longer and ask some questions for Salim and Grace. But before I do that, I briefly just share a couple more slides. Those of you, I think we've got a few on the call that go to our church in England, you'll know that I love my slides. So I'll get these up. Okay, and this is just to say that we are going to Australia it's getting close, in a few weeks' time, a month's time, and we'll be speaking in different churches there to raise awareness for a lot of the work of our partners and for the work that we're doing with Seek Peace. And we will be plugging some of this material that we're starting to develop in partnership with the different organizations we work with And the schedule for this is in 2025. While we're in Australia, we'll be sharing drafts of these and sharing content from these at the various meetings we're in, getting feedback from pastors and church leaders on where this is hitting as well, and as we continue to develop it. But the plan is we'll have this first resource, and what they're going to be is resources for small groups in churches, really discussion points for people to discuss amongst themselves and grow in some of these areas. The first one will be called Unity, and that is really focused on that, what we talked about before, about the churches improving their postures, skills, and processes for conflict transformation as churches. And then 2026, we're hoping to move more into the space of, okay, building on those skills that churches are learning. What role does the church have to play in communities when it comes to areas of reconciliation? And Salim and Grace are a huge part of this as well, developing it as well, as we're learning from things that are happening in their context and what's working in their context. We're also talking with other organizations. These resources we're developing them largely for UK and Australian audiences, so be informed by organizations here as well, what their trends they're noticing, what might be helpful to include in these resources for those churches. But yeah, those are the resources we're working on developing, and you can expect to get hold of the first part this year.
And I think it's really important to just say at this point, to recognize where we are, where we're located. You know, UK, Australia, historically, we have come from nations that are more financial, you know, much more wealthy, and been resources of so many, like have held financial resources and kind of dominated that area. And I think we have in history kind of thought problems exist outside of ourselves, and we haven't taken due ownership of how we and our cultures and our nations have played a role historically in how the world exists and what conflict looks like today in the world. We've contributed to that. And we do have a part to play in recognizing that conflict exists in our culture too. It looks different. We might be as inadequate at addressing, you know, and having the skills for developing conflict awareness and conflict management in our own congregations as other parts of the world face too. And then taking due responsibility for what that means in terms of what we support in missions, what we pioneer, what we get behind, what we champion. And I think we are putting up our hands to seek peace and recognizing that and being like, we want to play our part in facilitating change where we're located, and bringing that learning and that awareness so that we can play a small role in what God is doing through his church, and what's happening in the world, what he's doing all over the world in places that, you know, in places where the gospel is just going out and bringing huge transformation to local communities. We want to get behind that and be well positioned to champion and further that in appropriate ways. So, yeah.
Great. I think what we'll do now is stop the recording, and those of you who want to stay on and ask any questions, you're very welcome to. We'll probably keep this meeting open for another 20 to 30 minutes. So I'm stopping the recording, and then if anyone's got a question, go for it.